There are a lot of headlines like this discussing some leaked specs and performance targets for the RTX 60 series, even featuring some tables which are showing like the 60 series compared against the 50 series. And then there's also some headlines like this saying basically that's nonsense, don't believe any of it, it's complete speculation. Now, the original source for these types of specs seems to be coming from Red Gaming Tech. And, I'll link that source in the video description here as well. So I'm going to give my thoughts on this as well as a few other quick news articles that are on the docket today. But this is definitely going to be the main target is basically, so what should we make of these leaked RTX 60 series performance numbers and specs? Now, performance-wise, the claim really seems to be focusing around huge gains in ray tracing performance, where the claim is, again, I found this at Tech Power Up, but they're getting the source as the Red Gaming Tech YouTube video, saying that NVIDIA is chasing a 100% gen over gen increase in real-time path tracing performance over the Blackwell 50 series GPUs, and then less than a 100% increase in the non-path tracing performance. Now, I will say that sounds at least plausible to be a thing that might be on NVIDIA's radar. AMD's RDNA 5 has been heavily rumored as chasing huge increases to ray tracing performance, especially targeting path tracing. The next generation consoles, which will probably be using at least some amount of the RDNA 5 GPU architecture, have touted huge increases to ray tracing performance over previous generations. So if NVIDIA wants to maintain their lead in ray tracing and path tracing performance, it would make sense that they would once again chase that. Also, if the next generation of games are targeting heavier levels of ray tracing because the consoles will be more capable of running it, then that would also, again, make sense to be a thing to be chasing in this next generation of gaming GPUs. So I would say, at least from a plausibility standpoint, that kind of a target does make sense. But is that the same thing as there are actual sources claiming that, that is what they're trying to do? Well, that's where you have to just come in on, so how much do you trust, Red Gaming Tech's sources for this information? And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute and my thoughts on that. Although I'll kind of spoil it right now to say I'm a little bit more on the videocards.com take on this, which is these all sound like plausible speculation, but not necessarily at a point in time where I would expect really locked in targets to really be available information at this point in time. Now, I'll give more thoughts on why that could be the case. But let's further evaluate what the claims are, and then I'll get, like I said, more into my thoughts on the plausibility of the claims and the sources of information. So traditional raster 3D graphics performance are predicted to be between more like a 30 to 35% performance increase, which would be mostly based on improvements on IPC, clock speed, energy efficiency, coming to the 3 nanometer process, etc. And the leaked specs, now this is Tech Power Up taking the Red Gaming Tech source and then kind of putting it into a table alongside the previous generation cards. I just realized this is chopping some of that off, so I'll pop out here. We would kind of see something like this. But again, this is all based on if you trust the source of the 60 series claims. So the rumor is that we'll be dropping down to 3 nanometer. Now that makes total sense. Everybody is expecting 3 nanometer for the 60 series GPUs, which is a drop from the 4N process, which is actually a 5 nanometer process from TSMC. So that would allow, greater density and energy efficiency and that type of thing. But when we start to get into claims like, the 6070 will specifically have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, up from 12 gigabytes on a 256-bit bus compared to 192-bit bus, that's where I start to get into, I just really doubt that this is ironed out to that point even within NVIDIA. There's probably some SKUs being thrown around for boards that could end up being a 6070 and potentially could support 16 gigabytes of VRAM. But honestly, I think we're still pretty far out from this launch. And I think that a lot of these will still be up in the air, especially based on VRAM pricing. Like if memory prices are still crazy high when we get to the launch, then I think that could end up impacting like the VRAM capacities that we end up seeing, that kind of thing. So anyway, these are the rumored specs. And so we can see 5080 compared to 6080. It would be apparently jumping up to 20 gigabytes of VRAM, so you do get a little bit more, and the bus width would jump up from 256 to 320. And then the 6090 would continue to be a 32 gigabyte card using a 512-bit bus. They didn't have claims on the exact shader counts or anything like this. So at this point, I would say that all of this sounds plausible. But does that mean that it's actually been pinned down at this point by any particular source? So videocards.com is coming down very strongly on this is speculative stuff that could make sense, but isn't ironed out at any specific level. And their main reason for that is that they're saying that their sources, so this is videocards.com sources, NVIDIA hasn't disclosed specific performance targets for the next generation GPUs. Clock speeds are unknown, and Rubin gaming chips have not taped out yet. So because that's the information videocards.com has from their sources, they're coming down on a very hard line of this is speculation. Now, I will say that I think it's very possible that Red Gaming Tech has received this information from sources, but they could have all sorts of sources, and sources are not always completely reliable. So it's possible that he's in contact with people who have shared this information, but do they actually know this information? Now, so when we're getting into the leaks and rumor side of things, you really have to also look at track records. So I will say that Red Gaming Tech, when I've looked into it, and I've been reporting on this stuff for, like 5.5 years now, Red Gaming Tech absolutely has had accurate information leaked ahead of time for graphics card launches up front. I believe he was one of the first ones with like the AMD's like 6000 series GPUs talking about infinity cache and those big cache values. I know that he's had performance numbers at least a day ahead of time for slides that ended up coming out at big announcements. I'm really thinking back to like the 6000 series, and I think he's had a few things since then as well. So Red Gaming Tech certainly in the past has had accurate sources of information ahead of time, but that doesn't mean that all of his sources are the same people and they're all as accurate, and I don't know what his current sources look like, etc. So that's where I'm going to come down with all of this is I think that the videocards.com assessment of any sources that are within, like, I think my impression of videocards.com sources is that they're somewhere within like board partners or somewhere within that chain. And so at least within board partners, it doesn't seem like this information is publicly available at this point, or I shouldn't say publicly available, or like available within the board partners. And so maybe Red Gaming Tech has some source that's outside of that, that's maybe more within NVIDIA. But I would say even at that level within NVIDIA, I think there's probably some discussion of what targets are and things like that. But I don't think that they would have pinned down specific SKUs at this point, and real specific VRAM capacities and things like that. So I will say that all of this sounds like plausible things that could happen, but I think this is very early to say that this is like definitely happening or anything like that. So that's my thought here. Now, again, if we want just more of my thoughts on reasonable speculation on what'll happen with the 60 series, I think that if VRAM prices end up being still incredibly high, that it's possible that we will see no addition to the VRAM capacities at different SKUs. Now, I think that on paper, they probably are targeting at this point some marginal increases, something like what we're seeing here. Maybe the 70 class could go up to 16 instead of 12, 20 instead of 16. All of these sound very plausible as far as things that NVIDIA would like to target. And I think if VRAM prices at least don't get worse than where they are now, that these kind of modest increases do sound like something that they could try to target and keep prices still about where they are now, maybe a little bit higher, but not too much higher, and they could still keep a lot of margin. If VRAM prices continue to get worse, that's where I could actually see them just being like, well, crap, guess we're just staying at the same VRAM capacities that we had in the previous generation. So that's where I'm saying a lot of this could be up in the air, because even if they have some like boards in mind that would hit these specs, you could rename these things, right? These could all get renamed, or different decisions could be made at this point. We're still, I think, a long ways out from any of this getting set in stone. And that's where I'm at on this. So credibility of the source, Red Gaming Tech absolutely has had some accurate leaks in the past. But I do think this is pretty early, like videocards.com is saying. So all of this sounds like, even if there is some source saying these things, I really doubt anything's particularly set in stone at this time. But there you go. Now, as far as other little bits of news, since I'm already making a video today, while I was looking at videocards.com, and they're also saying that it looks like AMD may be renaming Anti-Lag 2 to FSR Latency Reduction 2. Now, they seem to be looking at looking at how it's being referred to in some code here as FSR Latency Reduction 2. And so I think this also sounds very plausible that AMD could be going this direction. Remember that AMD has actually rebranded a bunch of their stuff. Like, technically, FSR 4 doesn't really exist anymore. It's officially FSR Upscaling parentheses ML. Like, that's what it's actually being branded as now. And AMD's other technologies, like it's even changed. They don't say Fidelity FX super resolution, it's just FSR now. And FSR frame generation, it's no longer Fidelity FX. So it seems like they're branding a bunch of things as FSR and then the thing. So it does sound completely plausible that AMD could be renaming Anti-Lag 2 as FSR Latency Reduction 2.0. And I could definitely see that being a thing that they do, because it seems in line with their current branding strategy. Now, I don't like them getting rid of the FSR4 branding, because I think it was a well-reviewed technology, and they should have capitalized on that rather than renaming it. But it does seem to be in line with what AMD is currently doing with their names for their GPU technologies, just calling everything FSR and then the thing, even though it's not all super resolution technology and whatever. Anyway. Also, AMD has talked about AM5 following the same philosophy as AM4 while celebrating the 10th anniversary of the socket. So people have loved how many generations of CPUs we got on AM4, which I think is great, and it's a good reason to trust buying into an AMD CPU platform when you know that you're going to be getting many generations of support. Now, that being said, I've seen some people saying this as basically confirming that AM5 won't just have the next generation of CPUs, presumably the, let's see, we're on the 9000, so they could call it 10,000, or maybe they'll go to some new naming scheme, but the 10,000 series, the next generation, we will probably get that at least on AM5, but I've seen some people saying it confirms that there'll be even another generation past that. I would just say caution that with AM4 did get a bunch of generations, and it is still getting new CPU releases now, even as the AM5 platform does still exist. But a lot of the more recent updates have just been really kind of tweaks to things they already had. They're not like huge new performance gains. So really, after we got the 5800X3D, which was an amazing performance gain on that platform, then we've had other things like a 5700X3D, 5600X3D, and then like a 5700XT, which like slight tweaks to like the clock speeds and things like that. And so I would just say that, to my knowledge, AMD has not confirmed that AM5 will have a major CPU generation beyond the next one. So I think we'll get one more for sure, and then we may very well get another one, or two, or three, who knows, right? I just don't think that that's been confirmed. If you look at this quote for this particular where this headline is coming from, it's with AM4, we built a platform that made it easy for customers to upgrade their PC across multiple generations of processors. And this year, we celebrate its 10-year anniversary, supported by an expansive line of processors powering millions of systems around the world. That same philosophy continues with Socket AM5. Long-term platform support isn't just a marketing message for us, it's a commitment to protecting our customers' investments and giving enthusiasts a platform that can grow with them. So I think this is absolutely confirming that AM5 will continue to get new CPU launches for a long time, maybe even to its 10th anniversary. However, I don't think that's a guarantee that the latest generation of part will be on AM5 going out to even its 10th anniversary, because that's not what we saw with AM4. So I just want to caution people on that. Yeah, I absolutely think that our next generation of CPU from AMD will still be on AM5 and compatible with the same motherboard you had with your 7000 series. And maybe even the next generation after that will be, but I don't think that that's confirmation of this. And I've seen some people seeming to take this as confirmation that we'll get at least 2 more generations on AM5, and I'm not reading that as this. Now, it could be the case, but that's not how I'm reading it. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for you guys today as far as big PC hardware news. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting. All the sources will be in the video description, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.